As you said, the significance of the May Day is being lost on many fronts because it is highly politicized day for all the political parties, not only in Sri Lanka, even outside. May Day was born in 1886 due to the struggle of the American workers for an 8-hour day. This 8-hour day struggle, of course, started way back in 1983, and the sustained fight, struggles, sacrifices of the American working class climaxed in Chicago in 1886, and the demonstration that was led by Parsons, the leader of the group that was agitating for 8-hour day, was assassinated, or rather he was a bomb was thrown into the crowd, and then the entire demonstration was dispersed by power of the police. 8 people were convicted, and the conviction was done by a set-up jury. And the history records that not a single person who was convicted was guilty any complicity of what took place as an agent provocator's act of throwing a bomb at the police. That was the beginning of the May Day. And throughout the world since then, workers have demonstrated in America and Europe on this question of improving the condition of the workers and also advancing their interests. Today, throughout the world, we see complete disorientation of the significance of May Day. Disorientation that had taken place among the working class, when you refer that, particularly in the Sri Lankan context, it has to be noted that Sri Lanka at one time had a system, or rather a practice of the observing May Day along with the advancing of the interests of the working class.
A May Day that was truly meant for the working class of this country.
That's right. It was not, it is a day that the working class should observe independent of political parties, independent of political interests of other classes. We can observe the May Day with the working class interests, but not with the interests of the advancing the interests of the capitalist class or the class that is not associated with the working people.
You said we have to celebrate the May Day, separate from political parties, but what about the parties of the left, parties like the Lanka Samaj Party, the parties that were the Labour Party here in Sri Lanka, parties that were mainly established to pursue the rights and freedoms of employees?
Of course, I think you hit the nail right on the head, because working class should have politics. It should have its own politics, the working class politics. It began, when the left movement began in Sri Lanka, it was based on the working class. It was based on the program that was meant to take the working class interests forward. And that interest was shown by the working class parties at that time, the LSP particularly and the CP. They expanded their political base through struggles of the working class. The working class was in the forefront in building those parties. In 1932, I think we should remember the stalwart of the trade union movement, A.U. Gunasinghe, who was the first leader who gave a solid foundation to the trade union movement in Sri Lanka. And by 1932, his influence waned because of the influx of Marxist students from outside the country. In the sense, Dr. Colina de Silva, Dr. N.M. Pereira, and Dr. S.A. Vikramasinghe, not forgetting Mr. Peter Kahneman. These are the people who took to working class politics. At that time, the working class politics and the politics of the party telescope together, and it was one unified movement for the improvement of the working class conditions.
Mr. Razdeen, almost 100 years after the 8-hour working shift was won for the general public, or the working class, moreover, there are talks that this privilege or this 8-hour working day there are attempts to impinge on the established 8-hour working day here in Sri Lanka. You take
Yes, I think I must focus on that, particularly when we observe May Day. The 8-hour working day was won on May Day. Today we are facing a threat to the 8-hour working day. Under the guise of operating a 5-day week, the employers in this country and the government is circumventing the law, the present law of 8-hour working day, and they are on a spree to inveigle the working class to agree to a 5-day week with an additional hour of work without any compensation, and that is against the law of the country. The law specifically says in the wages, under the Wages Board ordinance, it is 40 hours. Under the Shop and Office Employees Act, a similar provision.
So it's 40 hours a week?
Yes, 40-hour week.
So according to law, a 6-day a week, a working day of the week is
Five
also
and a half day week. 5.5 day week.
Okay.
Sorry. And 40-hour week. So this is now being scuttled through, not through legal means, but through administrative methods. The unions have opposed this. But the problem here is the workers' side is being won over by placing the carrot of 5-day week with 1 day rest, right? And the workers have now fallen for that by and large, and they are silent. But the point is that the trade union cannot be silent on this matter. The 8-hour day is precious to the working class. It is dear to the working class. It has to be retained and not in any way diluted or allowed to be taken away. And we have proposed that the government that you can have a 5-day week operating, but then the extra hour will have to be compensated. Compensation for the extra hour is necessary within the law. So you have the 5-day week and you observe the law also if you pay. I have come to know that certain employees are willing to do that. But their organization, represented by the Employees Federation of Ceylon, have not come forward, it has not come forward to allow those members to operate their scheme of work on 5-day week, and they have blocked the operation of the 8-hour day by asking the government to be firm on this question of operating a 5-day week.
And adding an additional hour.
With additional hour without compensation.
Right.
You see? The other matter that concerns the trade union movement today is the question of manpower employees. Now, manpower employees are employed in large measure throughout the employment sector. So the the position of the trade union is to safeguard the rights of the manpower employees. Now this could be done by observing the present existing law. There are regulations stipulating who should be employed, and the parameters of employment is clearly mentioned there. What is being proposed now, and it is on the drawing boards, that the employer can employ any type of employees through manpower, but then the right of the employees are sacrificed. The right of the employees are not allowed to be observed because the proposed legislation says it narrows down the rights of the working, the safeguard that is there in the present legislation. So the fight is on now to get the manpower employees back on the same level as other employees if the present legislation is observed to the very letter.
So we see in certain European countries, progressive legislation on labor rights are being introduced. In countries like France, it is illegal for an employee who employs more than 50 workers under him, who controls more than 50 workers under him, to email their employees after a certain time period. Now, when developed countries are moving forward in labor legislation, why is Sri Lanka taking a step back? Aren't trade unions presenting recommendations on progressive legislation for labor laws?
Well, these are things that has to be discussed in the context of the present existing rights of workers. Because if you are introducing new legislation,
progressive legislation,
that has to be progressive in the sense there has to be inbuilt safeguards to the workers, to the employees. Without those safeguards, you can't have any kind of progressive legislation. Now, the issue that you referred to about asking in France, asking employees to or employer to email,
not to email their employees after a certain time.
Yeah, so that is a different situation and different context. It has not come into Sri Lanka up to now, but now it is making its way. There is a proposal on this future of work in Sri Lanka where these things are being discussed but not finalized. The trade unions are not against any innovative legislation, progressive legislation, but there has to be safeguards to the working people, the people who are engaged in that type of work, whether it is part-time, whether it is contract labor, whatever the type of the thing. We stand for the right of the employer to recruit anyone, but their type of work will have to be defined. Now you can employ, the employer should be given the right to employ casual, temporary, contract labor, yes. We stand for that right. But that right should be observed in a manner that the rights of the workers are there. You see, it should be properly defined. The parameters will have to be laid down, without which I think if you allow that kind of thing to happen,
if you open the floodgates,
and you allow the employer to hire and fire, this kind of thing belongs to the bygone era. There has to be respect built among the employer and the employee. Respect, first you have to respect the rights, then comes the duties of the employee. If these are clearly defined in the law, then of course I think we can move forward.
Speaking about the rights of the working class in the country, how important do you believe is it to balance the rights of the working class and the furtherance of the goals of a country as a whole? Now, we saw in the recent past there was a spree of strikes and trade union actions being organized to demand for certain rights. Now, the motive behind these strikes and trade union actions are also questionable. We will come to that question later on. But when trade unions are resorting to these kind of trade union actions and strike actions, do you believe that they're using it as a last resort, or is that their first go-to option?
Trade union action is a broad term. You see,
you get work to rule campaigns, you get strike actions.
Yeah, all that is, you have to exhaust all your means of advancing the demands.
So as a trade union, to initially advance your demands, what would be the process? What would be, if I may, a list?
Yeah, first you present your demands.
Okay.
Then you start negotiations. There's a process of, if the negotiation break down, there's a process that takes place in the Labor Department, where conciliation process takes place.
Right.
If conciliation breaks down, the authorities have two options. One is to refer the dispute to arbitration.
Okay.
Right? Or the union, if they refuse arbitration, the right to strike. Now the right to strike is the last weapon that the union resort.
But is that the case?
Pardon?
But is that the case right now?
That is not the case, in my view.
Okay.
There are certainly responsible trade unions.
Right.
I know that. And we all know about it. Right? I don't want to refer the names of the unions, but then there's a cause for all these things. The underlying cause will have to be gone into.
What is the underlying cause?
Underlying cause is apathy on the part of the authorities.
Okay.
Right? Not invoking the law. No proper culture of work in the workplace. Right? Then there is lack of mutual understanding and confidence building.
What about political influence?
I don't see any political influence in the sense that that strikes can be triggered on political grounds.
We have seen certain strike actions being triggered for objectives other than advancing workers' rights.
In certain sectors, yes.
Especially in the health sector, in the transportation sector, they strike for separate demands that have nothing to do with the rights in their respective profession.
Well, in the health sector, yes, I observed the phenomena that you mentioned. But I don't think in the railways or in the transport sector these are taking place.
We saw that very recently during the start of the New Year season. There were threats to strike from the railway sector, from private bus owners, and as well as the health sector. Now, all these three came in at once for various demands. It's almost as if they're trying to use the people, as they're trying to hold the people hostage to further their goals. Is this right? Do you believe this is right in your point of view?
Well, you are lumped together the bus owners and the railway employees. The bus owners are a different kettle of fish.
Okay.
They try to advance their interests by jacking up the fares, by demanding more facilities from the government.
They are a trade union, are they not?
Right. They are an organized lot.
Okay.
They are not
Could they be defined as a
trade union of workers.
They are not a trade union of
workers. They are a trade union of employers.
Okay, right.
Now you get the Employers Federation of Sri Lanka.
Okay.
That's a trade union.
Right.
That's a trade union of employers.
What about the railway trade unions?
Railway trade union, they had simmering unrest in the workplace because their demands were not properly tackled.
Right.
You see, the authorities failed there. It is the failure of the authorities that brought about that. You see, there has to be a negotiating process.
So do you believe that these railway trade unions went through the entire process that you mentioned before?
There's another point that came into my mind, that is public sector lacks a dispute settlement procedure.
Right.
There is no dispute settlement procedure in the public sector.
But what about the list that you mentioned before, presenting your demands, going into conciliation, arbitration?
That's private sector.
That's private sector.
Private sector, we have clear-cut laws.
Right.
The process takes place.
So for the public sector, they don't have to go through this?
No, they are totally absent.
There is nothing.
They depend on the establishment code.
Right.
It doesn't mention any procedure where these issues are concerned. Only individual issues can be tackled on that level in the public sector, not collective disputes.
Right.
When collective dispute takes place, there has to be a set procedure. That procedure is lacking where the public sector is concerned.
So when it comes to these lacunas in the law, if I may call them, as the Ceylon Federation of Labour, have you put forward any recommendations to address this?
Yes. We have put number of, as a counter proposal to the employers,
Okay.
we have put forward an elaborate memorandum to both the government and the employers. And it is awaiting still any kind of solution.
Right.
Right.
When was this recommendation submitted?
These were made at the time that the employers put forward their proposal for labour reforms.
Right. And what were the content of the recommendations that you presented in the context of
One or two I just mentioned about how you tackle the manpower contract workers.
Right. But when it comes to solving collective disputes, what does it include?
Well, where you solve the collective dispute, it is there in the law.
Right.
What I mentioned to you, first you present the demands, then you start negotiation with the employers.
Right.
If that negotiation breaks down, you resort to the Labour Department intervention.
So the Ceylon Federation of Labour is proposing a similar method to solving private
public sector,
for the public sector as well.
That's right.
Right. What has been the response from the government in this regard?
Well, about 5 or 10 years ago, the first proposal by all the unions, not only the Ceylon Federation of Labour, all unions got together and they arrived at a consensus to have a system of dispute settlement procedure for the public sector. You see, public sector, there is this problem of the AR and FR, right? Then the establishment code. All this will have to be overall to get this done.
Right.
To have a new dispute settlement procedure.
So it's
that
a major
difficulty
reform.
they have. They are faced with that difficulty. But this has to be tackled. This has to come. Otherwise, you can't improve the public sector. You see, there has to be a streamlined system where collective disputes can be handled.
There is also a question of the effectiveness of the public sector. Now, this was not a question that popped up, a few months ago or quite recently, but this has been a pertinent issue in Sri Lanka, and it's also cited as one of the reasons why we have been lacking in our progress as an entire country. What do you believe is the reason for this, the lack in effectiveness of public sector employees?
Well, there are also the system is, at fault. The entire public service system that operates today as it is, it has to be completely overhauled. Because when you look at a country like Singapore, where the public sector is huge and their productivity level is high, I don't see any reason why the Sri Lankan cannot emulate the public sector of Singapore. Because there you get the worker satisfied, management satisfied, and the output of that, the net output is to the benefit of the country. Here what we lack is proper orientation of the public sector employees, one, and lack of orientation by the powers that be. You see, you got to develop a system of employees' council in the public sector where you can discuss common issues relating to the public sector and the public at large, because it is the public that matters. In the public sector, if you ask any member of the public, they are dissatisfied with the services rendered by the public sector.
Yes.
Because they see that the public sector is not up to their expectation, they are not delivering. So that's something radically wrong with the system that has to be looked into. various committees have set and produced reports.
But then those reports are just thrown in the waste paper basket.
Even the trade union proposal to have a streamlined dispute settlement procedure in the public sector is not taking off.
Of course, the issues of the working class here in Sri Lanka can be discussed in length for way more time, but we're allotted only 30 minutes on this show, and unfortunately, sir, we've come to the end of it. Thank you very much, Mr. Razdeen, for joining us on our show this morning and taking time off your busy schedule.
Thank you very much for the opportunity,
And
Yuan.
thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in to Newsline. Until next time, take care and God bless.
TV1 රැස්වීදන ජීවිතේ
Very good evening and welcome to Biz First in Focus. We're coming to you from the Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. Joining us today for our program is Professor Siri Hettige, is a professor of sociology. A very good evening, Professor, and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Professor, we're joining our viewers after the terror attacks on the 21st of April, the Easter Sunday terror attacks that caused quite a stir here in the Sri Lankan society. You are a professor of sociology. How did we come here as a country?
Well, I think it is a long story. It has many dimensions, and of course, I cannot really, discuss all those relevant dimensions. I'm quite sure there are global dimensions to this, whether it is global politics, the global political economy, international relations, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we also have our own domestic situation. Once again, it is not a matter that we can discuss focusing entirely on here and now. What happened